Hello, everybody. Welcome to SafeDefend Live. Again, I'm Dave Evans with the most amazing Doc Greg Vecchi. We are going to talk about engaging the offender. Not something I highly recommend doing if you're not trained, Doc. But let's talk about what you can do if it comes to that and when you should engage the offender, because that's really the question, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point of this. This is not a some sort of a tactical presentation or anything like that by any means. Um, some of the things, and we were just doing some training at a school in around St. Louis area, and as part of the training, they bought the safe defense system, and we go through the training and the tools and things like this. And there's still some confusion where kind of their expectation sometimes is that they got to take it upon themselves to take the initiative and go after the offender, right? And a lot of them, a lot of the people that I've seen do this are pretty much guys for the most part, and a lot of them are veterans or former law enforcement, or they have family that's law enforcement, and they've got this idea that it's somehow their job to go after the offender. And I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of confusion out there. Because I mean, certainly if you are escaping and running away and all of a sudden the guy steps out in front of you, of course you've got to do something, right? I mean, but that's more of a reactive thing. When I'm talking about, as far as we're talking about engaging the offender, is being proactive, but proactive as far as defending your position. That's really what we're talking about. We never, ever, ever, ever suggest or expect someone who's not a first responder, someone who's not actually trained and that has the authority to make that a priority, to take the initiative and go after the offender. That is the job of the police and whoever else shows up, right, that has that authority to do so. What we're talking about mostly is, we talk about that critical time gap, and we say this all the time. This is really where the safe defense system works the best. You've got this instant notification, and then the burden's off your shoulders, and now we can focus on staying safe between when the attack starts and when it ends, and that is the time that we're focusing on. So your options, obviously, are, if you can get away from the offender, certainly, escape or run, whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of times, though, I think most people will just play it safe and lock down, which is great. And when you're locking down, you certainly want to have a door that locks and barricade and get away from the door and go to the safer corner. All the things that we've talked about ad nauseum, right? When we do the training. But one of the things to keep in mind is, as far as engaging the attacker, is we're really talking about threshold protection. And what I mean by that is, any weapon or body part or anything that is the attacker puts across the threshold, through a door, through a window, through a vent, through something that actually crosses into your safe space, right? If you're barricaded, that's what we're talking about. And so, a couple things to keep in mind is, just like in evasion or lockdown, you can prearrange and have a plan for this. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, he's coming in the room. What do we do? There is a plan, and you can have a plan. What we kind of forget about the offender is that he is not expecting you to fight. He's got the gun. He expects to win, and he's pretty much cocky, right? He's just, he's going in and trying to cause as much death and destruction as possible, and everyone's a target, right? So he's not expecting that. And what we try to do is it's kind of like an action reaction problem. He comes in and we do something to get him to say, oh, well, wait a minute, I didn't expect that. And while he's in that hesitation, we take that initiative back, and then that is when we attack, and that's how we win. And so two things come to mind that are really easy, right? First off is having the right tools. If you don't have the tools that you want, or you can't get them, or they're not provided, right? Like, for example, we provide the baton, we provide the pepper spray, their gel, right? We provide a strobe flashlight and everything like this. Well, not everyone's going to have that, right? Not everyone even has a safe defense system, right? but you certainly can pre-stage things. And that's kind of the emphasis here. Number one is to try to pre-stage things. A tool, a hammer, something that you could use as an improvised weapon. So now we're looking around the room and looking at things that, normally are used for one thing, but we have to think of it from another perspective. And so you can pre-stage that stuff, right? So rather you've got the perfect tools that you really want or something that's going to work, you can pre-stage it. So that's number one, to kind of stay ahead of the problem here, because now you've got something, you know where it is, you know how to use it. The last thing is to have a plan. Everyone should have a role. And so let's say that we're in a situation. Now, this is different, of course, depending on the scenario or whatever. But let's say that you're in an office situation and you're in a conference room or an office like this. You hear a gunshot and you got 4 or 5 people in there with you, right? So you go ahead and barricade, you stay quiet, you lock the door, all this other stuff like this. Well, what you should do is part of the reason that we go to the safer corner, besides the fact that it's the safest place in the room in case he does come in, is the fact that you're ready to go, lined up to ambush this person. And so if you think it a little bit further and can look at it from the standpoint of really having a plan, give everybody a job. Everybody needs a job in this. Maybe someone's going to take the weapon hand. Someone's going to take the left arm. Someone's going to take the right leg, the left leg, the head, the groin, the knee, whatever it is like this. And so everyone has a role and a job. And if their body part comes in, they do everything they can to attack that body part and keep the pressure on until the person is subdued. And that's something that is not really thought of. And that ambush or that counter ambush attack is really what works very, very well, because he's going to be surprised. He's not expecting it, and you're all over him, and everyone has a job. And so when you're thinking of it in terms of that, now this is a very unlikely situation, but in the event it happens, we're adding, layers and roles to, okay, well, here's plan A is escape, plan B is barricading or evasion, and plan C is fighting or engaging. But how would we, possibly make the success rate better by having the weapons, the improvised weapons, know where they are, know how to use them, whatever they are, have them staged, and then be in the position with your own job, right? So in that case, that body part comes in. The last thing I'll say here, though, is just a point of warning here, right? Is that you have to be very careful that, God forbid, you would have to engage an attacker. Once he is no longer a threat, once he is subdued, you have to stop. You can't continue to apply deadly force or unnecessary force, because then it becomes a crime. And so that's just one thing that you have to be aware of, is that once he's subdued, you can hold him down, tie him up, whatever you need to do, but you've really got to stop the attack, because that's just the law, and that applies pretty much, self-defense type laws throughout the country. And that's just always good to keep in mind, because obviously everyone's going to be excited, but you've got to really know when to stop, and you got to constantly assess the situation and adjust.
Yeah, Doc, that's important, because good friends with a judge here in Oklahoma that I eat lunch with on a regular basis with our friends, and we've had this conversation other times. At what point does self-defense end and a crime begin? And he always says, once they're on the ground and they are subdued, you have to stop using force other than to hold them in place. So right. You can't kick them, you can't hit them anymore, you can't do anything else, because now you've crossed over from self-defense to a felony. So if you are in this situation, just remember that, and you're going to be emotional, and it's going to be hard to control it, which is why we don't like untrained professionals engaging an offender. But if you have to, you have to. I think the best thing that Doc told us today is be in the safer corner, have a plan of specific body parts you're going to go after as a team at one time to ensure the most opportunity for success. If they have a firearm or a weapon, it's going to be hard, and you're probably going to get injured. But if you have a plan and you execute it, that's the best way to ensure your safety. For all those guys out there, they're going to run into the fight that aren't trained or retired from service. Think twice before you do that. Sometimes it causes more harm than good. You'll know your situation if you had training. You'll know what to do and what not to do. But realize Let law enforcement do their job. Unless you absolutely have to engage the offender. I don't like that as a first choice because it can end a lot worse than people realize. So make good choices, and remember, once they're subdued and they're under control, you got to stop using deadly force on the individual.
And the only thing I would add to that, as far as thinking about it in terms of what the typical legal standard is on this, and it pretty much applies to people that carry concealed carry
Yep.
weapons, right? And pretty much it's the same thing. Well, you have to be able to assess and be able to explain, right? Because afterwards, there's going to be an investigation. You're going to be interviewed, and they're going to be trying to figure out, who committed the crime, who didn't, and all this other stuff. So a couple things that is kind of good advice that I've learned in all my years of teaching this type of stuff, right? Self-defense stuff and everything, is that number one, you have to be able to articulate or explain why you felt at the time that you were in fear of death or serious bodily injury. And it has to be reasonable. You have to articulate why you felt that way, right? Guy was holding a gun and pointing it at me, right? That's very, very simple, right? And then you have to, the second thing you got to continue on is that, of course, once you no longer are under death or serious bodily injury or fear of that, you simply have to stop and move to less lethal. And that's really the real easy standard to think about. Am I in fear of death or serious bodily injury? If I am, go for it. Deadly force is authorized. You are good to go. If you reassess and say no longer in fear of death or serious bodily injury, then you can't reasonably, support, continuing the use of deadly force. You got to stop.
Those are facts. So with that, this episode of Safe Defend Live with Doc and Dave, we are out of here. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.